Have you ever known a pathological liar? Yes. Yes, I have. And it's a fascinating thing. Pathological lying is fascinating to me. Now, I'm not saying, you can tell from the stories that I've told that I've spent a lot of time lying. But pathological lying is like people that are just out of control. They cannot help but lie about every aspect of their lives. And I'll tell you about the guy that I knew that was a pathological liar. In high school, I was friends with this guy named Mike, and he and I were in this little clique of friends and drama. We would play Magic the Gathering together, and at first they really didn't like me because I wasn't like them. They were very kind of introverted. Mike was a very goth type of guy, kind of trench coat mafia type of guy, wore like hats and coats, and like every once in a while would walk with a cane because he had mangled his leg in an accident when he was a kid, and it would flare up and he'd have to have a cane to walk with. And he was very disdainful of other people. But I wanted to play Magic cards with somebody. So I made friends with them, and eventually they really liked me, and we became really close friends. Mike was, like me, a storyteller. And while I will freely admit, and have in the past, that there is embellishment that goes into my stories, I think telling a story is walking in the gray area between dry recitation of fact, almost like you're testifying at a trial or something, just the facts, and a complete bullshit story. And if you're a good storyteller, you know how to effortlessly walk in that gray area between bullshit story and dry fact. So I do embellish my stories. I fill in the gaps in my memory. I highlight some things to point out the absurdity of them. And Mike was a fantastic storyteller too, and Mike had tons of stories. And one night, I went and was hanging out with Mike and a couple of our other friends, and we all got really stoned together. And everybody else went home, but I was really, really high and drunk by this time as well. And I was like, dude, can I just crash on your couch? He's like, yeah, my parents are gone, that's fine. So we're hanging out together, just me and Mike. And I go into his bathroom to drop a leak. And I'm pissing. And I look over at his wall, and his parents had hung up like the 10 Commandments, this little plaque with the 10 Commandments on it. And I was like, oh, that's funny. So I went back out, sat down with Mike on the couch, and I was like, dude, I was in there pissing. And I was reading your 10 Commandments. I never even noticed I was there, bro. It's like, yeah, man. It's awesome, isn't it? And he goes, so have you ever like actually looked at the 10 Commandments and asked yourself like how many of these you've broken? And I was like, no, I don't believe that I have. So he ran into the bathroom and pulled that little plaque down off the little nail it was hanging on and brought it into the living room, and he handed it to me and said, go through them. So I went through them, honor their father and mother. Yeah, I broke that one. Thou shalt not steal. I broke that one. Thou shalt hold no other gods before me. I don't know, I probably broke that one. Thou shalt not worship graven images, probably. Thou shalt not kill. Nope, haven't broken that one, at least to my knowledge. Etc. I went through the whole list. And then I handed it to him, and I was like, what about you, man? So he goes through it. And then and thinking back on it, it was so dramatic that I should have smelled bullshit. But I was a really gullible guy. I looked up to Mike in a big way. And, on top of it, I was really stoned and drunk. Mike goes down the list, and then he gets to thou shalt not kill. And he gets real quiet. He gets real quiet. And I'm sitting there like, thou shalt not kill. So yeah, right. So not that one, right? He goes, not exactly, Paul. And I'm like, what the fuck? You fucking killed somebody? He goes, shh. Nobody around, but he shushed me anyway. Shut the fuck up. Look, I haven't told anybody this fucking story, and I'm trusting you a lot telling you this fucking story. I like you, Paul, but I'm going to tell you something that you cannot fucking tell anybody. Already, I'm at a point where I don't want to hear the fucking story. I'm like, I wanted to say, no, that's okay. It's cool. Just move on to like the graven images one. Now it's a lot more fun because I'm scared of you now. But he was so serious that I was like, okay, Mike, yeah, I won't tell anybody. Whatever, dude, you can trust me. So he spins this yarn to me, one of many yarns that he had spun in the past, about his past, his childhood, things that he'd said and done. But this one took the ever-loving taco. This was it. He goes, you know, I grew up in Las Vegas. True. He had told me that before. I don't know if it was true, but true. Grew up in Las Vegas. And I had this girlfriend. Her name was Jennifer. And we were 14, 13 years old. This was right before I moved here to Madera. And we were madly in love. We loved each other very much. Anyway, one day, Jennifer was walking home. She'd come to my house to hang out. We weren't allowed to hang out at her house because her dad was an abusive drunk and didn't allow boys in the house. So she was hanging out over at my house, and we only lived 2 blocks away from each other, so she would walk home quite often. And I would walk her home usually. For whatever reason, that night I couldn't. I think my leg was acting up or something. So she walked home. And I never saw her again, man. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, really? How did we get here again? I didn't say that, but I'm thinking like, oh, fuck. He goes, I found out the next day that her body was found raped and beaten to death in an alleyway a block from her house, right in between where we live. And I'm going to tell you something, Paul. I knew right away who did it. I was like, what? There was this guy who lived in the same apartment building that she did that was always hitting on her. And he and his friends would drink in that alleyway, leaning up against one of the dumpsters, you know. Fucking real assholes. He was a few years older than her, 16, 17, I don't know. I knew it was him. I knew for an absolute fact that it was him that had done this to her. And as the days rolled by, the cops didn't have any leads. And I knew I had to fucking do something. I couldn't let this fucking guy get away with it. And I was like, please don't tell me this fucking story. He goes, so one day, I waited, watched him from the other end of the alley, waited till his friends took off. He slumped down, kind of drunk, lit up a cigarette, listening to his Discman or whatever. And that's when I walked over to him. And I pulled out this knife. And at this point, I shit you not, now Mike was known to carry weapons. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a switchblade, clicks it open, and he goes, I pulled out this fucking knife right here. And I walked up. He didn't even look up, man. Didn't even see me coming. And I said, hey. And as soon as he looked up, I grabbed him by the hair, and I stuck him right in the throat with this fucking knife, and I opened his fucking windpipe right up, and I left him there to die, gurgling like he drowned in his own fucking blood, man. And then a couple months later, we moved away, and I've never heard anything about it since. That's a fucking trip to lay on somebody. Stone cold sober. To lay it on somebody who's fucking drunk and high and gullible as shit and looks up to you. Mike and all this group of friends that I hung up with, they were both 2-3 years older than me. So by this time, they had already kind of graduated high school. They were college kids, you know. He lays this on me. And being who I am now, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, man, that sucks. I would have played it off and then I'd been like, bullshit. No, that never happened. I believed every fucking word of it. I had no reason to disbelieve Mike. I had no fucking reason. So I passed out that night, fucking barely got any sleep, went home the next day, and all day I'm thinking about, like, I'm a fucking, like, accessory after the fact. Like, there's unsolved murders in Las Vegas, and I'm one of, like, 2 people who knows the fucking answer. And what am I gonna do? What do I do? Like, I'm an accessory to murder. It freaked me out for like the rest of my friendship with Mike until one night. This was about a year later. I got a call from our other friend, Kevin. And Kevin called me and he said, hey, Paul, I wanted to talk to you about something. I said, sure. He said, did you hear that Mike's in the hospital again? And I had. Mike had told us all that he was having yet another surgery on his leg. The story that he told us about that was when he was little, his biological parents. Now, Mike had told us that the parents that he lived with now were adopted parents. His biological dad was a motorcycle guy. And he used to ride on the back of his dad's motorcycle when he was a little kid. And one day his dad got in a horrible accident and was killed. And Mike was thrown from the motorcycle and survived, but it mangled one of his legs. And so he's had multiple surgeries and pins and physical therapy. And he would hobble around on this leg and, like I said, walk around with a brace on and crutches sometimes, a cane sometimes. So he had told us that he was going in for another surgery on his leg, and that, we wouldn't hear from him for a couple of days. And we offered to go visit him, and he's like, no, dude, I don't like people visiting in the hospital. I hate being there. Just fucking see me when I get home. I'll be fine. If anything happens, you guys will find out, but it'll be fine. I've done this like 50 times. So Kevin calls me and he goes, I'm going to ask you a weird question. Have you ever felt that, like, Mike is not truthful with you? And I said, no. Like, Mike's always been open and honest with me. Why? And he goes, well, we just made a phone call to Mike's mom, and we wanted to make sure that he came through the surgery okay, but respect his wishes to not go visit him in the hospital. And asked his mom, how's Mike? Is he out of surgery yet? And she said, and I quote, what surgery? And we're headed over to her house to confront her about all the things that Mike has told us. Do you want to come? And I said, no, but please do let me know how it turns out. So Kevin and one of our other friends went to Mike's house. His car was not there. And asked his mom, can we come in? Sat down with his mom in the living room and started rattling off all these stories. It turns out that I was not the only person who had been told the story of Mike's murder spree, his revenge killing. And so they laid out every story that Mike had ever told, from the fact that he was adopted, the car accident, the leg that's had 50 surgeries, the girl that he was in love with that was raped and beaten and murdered to death, the person that he killed, all of these stories. And his mom was aghast, had no idea what we were talking about. And we straight up told her, he's been telling us this for years. We've known Mike for like 8 years. And he's been telling us this shit. We thought that Mike was no, Mike isn't adopted. We found out that everything that we knew about this guy, everything that he had ever told us, was a complete fabrication. And that's a weird feeling. It's fascinating to me on a level that there's a person out there, because I as a person who's told a lot of lies in his life, I realize what it feels like to live with that. And hey, Brian. Are you hanging out for a minute? Sorry, guys. Are you hanging out for a minute? Yeah. I need your help answering a question here in a minute. In fact, anyway, that's the pathological liar that I know. His name is Mike, and he told me a bunch of lies.